Hello and welcome to RuggaMatrix International, episode 259. I'm your host, Juro Sin, and joining me is Ben Kimber as usual. G'day, Benny.
Hello, bud. How are you?
You're pretty happy after your weekend?
I had a nice weekend, mate. Had a very nice weekend. Went for a little trip up the coast, up to Brisbane, and back down again.
What happened?
Bit of a game.
Wallabies had a win. All right, plenty to get into. What is Ben Kimber's strike issue of the week?
Well, mate, it is an absolute pleasure to be coming off the top of the show talking about a Wallabies Bledisloe Cup win. It's been a long time between drinks. I think we can say it's been a couple of years since the Wallabies beat the All Blacks, and I saw one quote or tweet that suggested it's been 512 days since a professional men's 15 team for Australia beat a Kiwi team after the shellacking we copped in Super Rugby, and you've got to go right back to last year in the Super Rugby to find a win. So 23-18, a great victory. Yes, I was there. I was in about row 10 on the 40-metre mark with my mate Nev. I posted a few pics. It was a great night. A little bit of rain to start with, but what a game. A really tense game. A game that was, down to the wire as we hoped, and one where the Wallabies found a bit of belief, and thank you for that. You've got to say they played a genuine team game. They put the pressure on the All Blacks. The All Blacks didn't control the game they would like to. They didn't finish things off. They didn't control their error rate. And the Wallabies played a complete game.
I don't know if they played the complete game, Ben. I think they were a long way from that, but I think it was a good game. You know what it was? Because someone like Peterlee Beale wasn't clinical and efficient as he usually was in the last few weeks, but what he was passionate, in your face, and I think in the end, the All Blacks lost the battle of composure. And that really undid. I was very surprised to see the All Blacks look so uncomposed in that game, and I think that's where they lost it. Clearly, Sopawanga it was his big chance at 10, and guys like McKenzie didn't perform that well. A lot of them didn't perform well, but they just didn't have the composure that we're used to the All Blacks team. I understand it with all the changes, but you still got to be able to aim up in a test match.
Let me just explain what I mean by complete. I don't mean that was you'd hold that up as the greatest performance ever by a test team. They did everything right. What I mean is we've talked this season about the way the Wallabies drop their bundle at times, how their heads go down, they don't chase the ball. That for complete for me, when they played an 80-minute game, when they made errors, they backed up. Their heads didn't go down. We're used to seeing this Wallaby side lose it a bit. The All Blacks turn the screws, and the Wallabies crack. They didn't crack this time, or if they did, they bounced back. If they did drop the ball, they got up and they went harder. In the forwards, they clearly outpointed the All Blacks. The scrum on a par really there, but around the park, yes, we talked about the fact that this All Black side was missing players. 6 or 7 guys who are world class. You've got to talk particularly about the Bowden Barrett, Brodie Retallick, Ben Smiths of the world. But don't forget, the back row was still there, their first choice back row. Sam Whitelock was in there. Aaron Smith was in there. This was still a good side with good players coming in, guys who've been looking like the next generation, the ones that Hansen is blooding. And across the park, the Wallabies outpointed them. I saw Paul Cully, a guy I've got a lot of respect for as a journo. He named his team of the game, and he only had room for 3 All Blacks in that side. Naholo, SBW, and Kieran Reid. Now, what I'd like to do is talk specifically about some of these players. I was at the game, and you get a very different view of the game there than you do later. So I went home, of course, and watched it on TV, tried to break it down a bit more and understand it more. And it was quite interesting to have watched it live. I had my impression there, and then read a fair bit of press about what everyone else thought, and then watched the game again. I disagreed with some of the analysis out of the game on players who did or didn't go well.
All right, so what did you disagree with?
Let's get into the Australian team first. Jack Dempsey got man of the match, and I would like to say he stepped up. We said he had to. He said at a big game against Argentina, he needed to show he could do it on the big stage, and he did. He's got great footwork, manages to get that extra yard or two. We talked about that in comparison to David Lyons, that little shimmy or shuffle. He definitely found those yards, but I think he was probably maybe the 4th or 5th best Wallaby on the park. He had a very good game, and he should be proud, and we hope we get more out of him. But I thought he was probably the 3rd best back rower we had. Hooper was everywhere. McMahon was enormous. Sean McMahon, start to finish, that 40-metre run up field towards the end, when you know he's been putting in all game, in defence and in attack, McMahon had a red-hot go. Going to Japan's not a good thing for that. But my man of the match really still, and I saw it on the time on the field, and I saw it afterwards, I thought Israel Folau was monstrous. He still cops a lot. I see some of our Kiwi followers say he wouldn't make the All Black side and he's overrated. geez, if you can watch that game and tell me that Israel Folau is overrated, I don't think you watch enough rugby. He was massive. Every time he took the ball, he was finding space. Every time he took the ball, he was beating guys. Positional play, getting outside, helped there by a few passes from Foley. I thought Folau was massive. So Folau, and of course Reece Hodge. Reece Hodge, I thought, was again one of the better players on the park for the Wallabies. Checker said he wants workers. Reece Hodge is a worker. He does not stop, runs the lines, tackle hard, gets up. Now, we've said before that Checker tactically can struggle. Here, at least, they played a good, solid game where they took the All Blacks on well, and they were probably a bit more adventurous. And I saw Hodge as part of that. I didn't think Foley was as bad as some thought, a couple of drop balls, but they moved the ball around and they all got stuck in and involved, and Adam Coleman led that pack. Who do you think stood out for the Wallabies, mate?
I agree with you with Israel Folau. I thought he was unbelievably good on the night, and he's really performed well this year. And it's because he's been given the extra opportunities that we've been begging for out of this side, and that's been ignited by the inclusion of Kurtley Beale in this side and the consistency, Ben, in the selection of the team. That's what's helped Israel. Finally. And for God's sake, can Hodge take the goal kicks from now on? Because
not just the goal kicks, mate.
And I just look. We'll talk about this about the in close and out far out kickers, which is nonsense, by the way. But we'll talk about that in a second. But I think someone like Israel Folau is always going to be a danger. But when you looked at him, the All Blacks were just all over the place when it came to assembling their defences against him. On the other side, in midfield, you talk about Sonny Bill having a good game, and he did have a good game, but there were a number of things he did that really spoilt the game. Obviously, that late grubber kick towards the end was just ridiculous. It was the dumbest play I've ever seen. But he also was encroaching offside and in the other defensive line many times off the ruck, and he was lucky he wasn't pinged. He was getting caught up in off-the-ball stuff, and they were very lucky at that time. I was watching him closely. So he had a great game, but they just did other stuff in the game that sort of undid the good work, the All Blacks. And Kieran Reid did some amazing stuff, but also did some little bits of silly play, or he didn't concentrate at times, where that's caused him to give away a penalty or the attack fall away. So everything that the All Blacks did was magnificent, but they did enough stuff to undo it.
I'm going to disagree with you on Sonny Bill Williams, and this is one of the areas that I read about, and I watched the game, and I didn't think he had a great game. I think sometimes people get a bit worked up when there's a couple of good hits in defence, and Sonny Bill Williams is a good defender. He's a good, strong, hard defender, and he smashed a couple of blokes, and often I think that sticks in the mind. But there are a couple of times I think Sopowanga's been a little bit harshly done by.
Oh, yeah, I think, you would too.
No, I think...
Just because you wanted him to play 10.
But I think he definitely could have done more. Didn't have a fantastic game. He did not have a shocker. A lot of the errors in the back line happened in the centres, happened with Crotty and Sonny Bill Williams.
His kicking game?
Sonny Bill Williams, well, yeah, fair point. But in the back line, Sonny Bill Williams twice or three times dropped the ball and put the passes in the wrong place to cruel what was happening. He's got a great pop pass. He doesn't have a great distribution game at all, which we know about him. I didn't think Sonny Bill had a great game. We said in the preview show that people like to stand up, the Aaron Smiths and Dane Coles of the world. They didn't. I thought Sopawanga got poor service from Aaron Smith. Aaron Smith, a couple of his passes, 2 or 3, hit the turf far away from the recipient, be it McKenzie or Sopawanga. And Aaron Smith did not have a good game. Dane Coles looks like a guy who is feeling the pressure. It became all about the niggle for him in the game. The extras that we see from Dane Coles around the field, non-existent. Cody Taylor's breathing down his neck. We've seen Asafo Amua now named for the tour. Dane Coles is going to be under pressure. Last year I said best player in the world. That game from him, too much niggle, too much carry on, and just distracting. When the All Blacks needed to be calm and firm, he wasn't one of those guys. I think Kieran Reid had a big game in the intensity of what he brought. He never stopped. I've said in the past, has he still got it? He still got it, but he didn't get the team settled. He was even given a chance by Barnes to say, go and calm your team down. He asked both captains to. He didn't take it. Didn't do it. He should have.
Yeah, he should have done that. And Hooper went, and it, doesn't matter what he says, at least he got the guys into a group and said it, and Kieran didn't do it. The referee will take note of that, obviously when he makes that instruction. But Ben, I thought, overall, I think it was one of those games where Australia did a good job. But the All Blacks definitely played their part. The opposition always plays their part, and they definitely had a chance to come back and get that game, or at least come and draw that game, the All Blacks. But once again, poor decision making and continuity and looking after that ball let the All Blacks down. Now, was it because of all the positional changes or the personnel changes? Or was it because they were a bit frazzled by the way the Wallabies played? So I say give the Wallabies a big tick for the way they play, but I think you've got to give a bit of an X and a cross for the All Blacks in the way they played the game, because I thought they just lost their way.
But the way they approached it too, in that this was a wet weather game and they looked like they wanted to play wet weather footy. The Wallabies looked a little bit more adventurous, where even from the start of the game we saw Sopawanga and SBW a couple of times with these little chip kicks, and they didn't really want the ball in hand. Ioane was barely involved and Naholo a couple of good touches, but they looked like a team that were trying to play a slightly more conservative brand, and I think that really gave the Wallabies the impetus to lift. I think they wanted to get stuck into them.
Well, you're right. On that point, just to underline that, is that your kicking has to be astute. So in those conditions, what you're talking about is in wet weather, you want to give the ball away and force the mistake. So they were trying to do that, but the kicks were always to players. They go to Israel Folau, one of the players at the back three for the Wallabies, and then they'd attack, or one of the loose forwards who were doing a great job. So they're kicking, and Sopawanga was the chief instigator of this for the All Blacks, where his kicks didn't have authority. I think Darren Ormsby said on Facebook at the time that he was a bit timid in the way he played. He might use a different term, but he didn't show that he was playing with any authority, and as a result the kicks weren't right. And if you're going to kick, you need to kick with purpose in the wet. So then your chasers have to be there to get the turnover ball, and the All Blacks just lost their way there.
Yeah, look, and I think that's fair on Sopawanga in terms of his game management wasn't there. I do think, though, the guys inside and outside him didn't have fantastic games, particularly in attack. Sonny Williams in the defence, yes, but particularly in attack, I don't think they did enough. Another point to really make is, we've said before that Damian McKenzie is a very talented guy, but whether he's the guy that is up to that standard that we see from other guys like a Ben Smith, and that's a harsh comparison, as we've said.
Yes.
He's a guy that I think can at times be found out, and I don't think he was fantastic in this game, and it just showed that there is that gulf between the players who are absolutely world class, the Brodie Retallicks and the Ben Smiths, versus the people who are still finding their way and may or may not get to that level, the Damian McKenzies and the Scott Barretts.
Well, I mean, it was one game, but I think Sopawanga is definitely in that realm with Beauden Barrett. I mean, Beauden Barrett, they definitely missed his kicking and his nous. I mean, he's a class above anyone else in the world when it comes to that play.
Now, speaking of kicking, let's go back to the earlier point you were making. Yep. Reece Hodge nails one from the sideline, and I think Foley was supposed to take that. It was in his range, and he's called him over and said, "You're taking it." So Foley's head clearly not right, because he hooked, I think, three, and they weren't good kicks. We've said before he can lose it in kicking, and Hodge has had booming kicks. Most of his kicks have been taken from a long way out. He hasn't had the accuracy. He said it himself afterwards. He said, "I haven't, lived up to the accuracy that you'd want." But he nailed those two, and you'd hope that every single day, from now on, he is working hard on that kicking, because he should be in the team the way he goes, and he should be doing the kicking. And let's not forget, he's only in the team because of Dale Hallett-Petty's injury. I think he always puts in. Checker hasn't been selecting him. I think with his boot, with the way he plays the game, he needs to be in there. But I think you're right. Train him up to be the full-time kicker. Make sure he's taking the kicks for line, because he has the distance that makes a difference. And even again, the Foley versus Sopawanga was finding more yards in that game. And I think Hodge needs to be in there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So the idea with the kicker is, if you've got a big boot and you're further out, you can take the big Hail Mary approach, where you just go towards the general direction of the post, and more often than not, you just give it a big reef and you'll get it over. But all he has to do then is refine that art. You're much better off being a natural kicker who can boot it a long way and get it over than the other way around, where you can just pop it over like Foley but have no chance at 45, 50 metres out. And even lesser than that, the accuracy suffers. So, and it's a psychological advantage too, to know that Australia can put goals over from anywhere. That changes the way you defend. You're less likely to infringe the breakdown and be offside. So, and the other night, the referee wasn't afraid to ping the All Blacks at all in that game, either side for that matter. But it was a really important part for Australia to grasp, the goal kicking from outside. Now, will Checker continue to use him, and will Cheika take this opportunity with the tour coming up to make a change at 10?
That is a big call, right? They've got their 4 games. I think they've got Japan, Wales, England, Scotland. Foley, he needs to find some support at 10, whether that's Beale or whether that's Carmichael Hunt, who you think's got to come back into play at some stage, but maybe it's Beale or Hunt for that 15 jersey. The absence of Izzy for that tour changes things a little bit, right? Where you might think he might have experimented more at 15, he's clearly got to do something at 10, he's clearly got to do something at 15, which may affect what he does at 10. But you're right, he's got to find some way to get Beale some time there, or Hunt some time there, or bring up a young bloke and start to see who can play in that 10 jersey.
So that's a big question. So without Folau there, it changes things a bit, and whether or not it's too much to make the change. But, you know, I'd like to see Beale, and I think I mentioned it briefly last week, Beale and Hunt at 10 and 12. And that, to me, was an exciting prospect for Australia. And when the main fullback comes back in Israel Folau, then that's a really exciting back line. But you don't want to make too many changes, and they need to get some consistency going, because the more these guys play together, with Korobedi on the wing, who's really doing a good job, he's hugging the sideline nicely.
Yeah, not a game, I think, where he was tested as much as, and goes to Sopawonga's kicking game too.
But he did what he had
But
to
when
do.
he had to,
Yeah.
he did it. He ran hard, he ran straight, and he also defended well against Ioane the few times where he had him one-on-one. I think one of the key things also that I saw in this game was, you just mentioned changes, that consistency in the Wallabies team. We talked before about, you know, Chicago and where Ireland got the All Blacks when we think Hansen made too many changes. This time they had changes forced on them. Change is just hard as a team to come on top of. No matter how good your squad, when you make a number of changes, in a number of positions, it can make it harder. Hansen had these forced on him, and it clearly didn't get there. Like, even people like Dane Coles finding Scott Barrett, the line out didn't quite work. And I'd also say that I hear about the All Blacks, they got found out for all their rough stuff off the ball. Look, I think they do push the envelope at times, but I think in this game they pushed it too far.
I think it was different. This is
different. This is not standard for them.
That was
That's
not
right.
a normal All Blacks game.
The clean-outs way off the ruck.
Yeah.
Tatafu Plota now taken out by Tuanga Fasi.
Even off camera. I mean,
Yep.
it was happening though. There was a couple of there was a cheap shot with a knee onto the leg of Curtly Beale. I noticed, and I was going to get a screen grab, but I didn't get around to it. But there was just like, and it wasn't really. Yeah, it wasn't that rough, but it was just niggle. Yeah. It was just the niggle that the All
Blacks... like it showed pressure.
Yeah, and it just showed that they were, Curtly got to them too. He was mouthing off, and as I said, Curtly didn't have a clinical game, but he had a really impassioned plea to his teammates to get behind the jersey. What a great scene that was, the Wallabies Indigenous jersey. And the team really got behind him on the night, and behind Stephen Moore, who came off the bench later. A great servant for Australian rugby, as we mentioned last week. So there was all this emotive part of the game that I think the Wallabies got on top of, and the All Blacks just lost their way a bit. Still an amazing side, the All Blacks, and they still almost came back.
Yeah, no, it was uncharacteristic, some of the stuff they did, and they got pinged for it. Wayne Barnes is famous for actually pinging the All Blacks, and it didn't quite work out. Look, you mentioned the Indigenous jersey. At the ground, I thought it was fantastic. The welcome to country was outstanding.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, the cooey. Can we bring the cooey back and bring it along more? The jersey meant a lot. I saw Curtly Beale's post on Instagram saying how much it meant to him, and you could see that emotion. Yeah. One question for you is, and I think Mark Ella mentioned this, and I saw a Richard Hines piece, people are saying, should it be the permanent jersey? I think that those guys are saying, only if there is genuine commitment to support for Indigenous Australians. The point they're trying to make is, don't just use the symbolism of it. Make sure that if the ARU are genuinely supporting Indigenous Australians, then they should be absolutely proudly representing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my community's Indigenous community from northern New South Wales, and I say there's an element to that. But by just having it on the jersey, you are showing a commitment. And what I mean by that is it's front and centre. And that shows that it's not just a one-off event; it's always on the jersey. I heard some other racist comments from some people in the country who got back to me that were saying, "What's all that sort of rubbish on there?" Well, in the end, these symbolic artwork, the artwork that's been done, means something from each of the different regions where our players are from. And it's certainly a lot better than having a logo from just a corporate, like Three Strikes or an Adidas or something down the line. So I'm saying by the mere fact that it's on the jersey and it's on there every week, man, that just sends so many good messages to everyone that it's always there. So I say, don't rely on that other stuff where it's got to, you know, they've got to show commitment here and there and there. The commitment should be just be on the jersey all the time. It looks great, and I actually thought social media wise, I couldn't believe how many people loved it.
Yeah, and I think that's what Peter Fitzsimons, old colleague and mate of ours, did a Twitter poll and said, should it be the permanent jersey? 80% plus on thousands of votes, all saying
great.
yes.
That's really,
bring
really
it home
good.
and do it.
Yeah.
I do want to just make a couple of points on being there on the day too. Kudos to the All Blacks and to Steve Hansen after the game. I saw Hansen, you know, deliberately going through and making sure he shook hands. The All Blacks stood out there and waited for Stephen Moore's recognition.
Great stuff.
Congratulations to Stephen Moore and what a career. His last game on Australian soil and potentially his last game for the Wallabies if Checker doesn't take him on the tour. But he has acquitted himself. We said it last week, but it was so nice to see him go out a winner. And the recognition, as I said, from the All Blacks who stood out there and made sure they were there for him, I thought was very, very good to see. And just as an event, it was a fantastic way to close out his career. Not quite the same for Wayne Smith, who was his last game in charge as an All Black coach, and he'll be sorely missed. I saw Bowden Barrett's Instagram post or Twitter post talking about how he has a glass of red every Tuesday with Wayne Smith.
Yeah.
And that professional approach and that humility that have become the hallmark of the All Blacks, I believe he has been the architect of more than anyone else. So he's definitely going to be a loss for them.
Quick question to you then. Did the All Blacks learn anything from that loss? Because we talked about some of the selections that, you know, particularly Sopawanga at 10, where the super coach would have liked to have seen him play, but would always pick Barrett instead. This way his hand was forced. He got a look at him. Another look at McKenzie. Another look at Sonny Bill at 12, who's had an up and down sort of year. What do you think?
Look, I think it's tough to take lessons out of the game other than part of the mental aspect. All those players out there we've seen play amazing footy before in the All Black structure, the way the All Blacks like to play. But they clearly felt the pressure of the night or of the new combinations, and they didn't get it right. And players who we said had been under pressure in previous weeks, which is hard, to say in a team which is going so well. But when you say the Aaron Smiths and the Dane Coles haven't had the sort of impact that they might, that's individually different to a team that's going well. That's guys who are thinking, I've got to get it right, and maybe they're putting some more pressure on themselves. So maybe we saw, people are talking about Hansen doing a great job of blooding young talent and bringing them forward for the World Cup. Maybe you'll be able to trace back to that game and say some of these guys were going to get the pressure from the youngsters coming on them, and then we started to see the edges of that.
Yeah, so it was definitely a lesson in wet weather football and the fact that they can't mess around in kicking. And the other one was attitude, not getting caught up. And I reckon Kieran Reid would have been disappointed with the boys afterwards to, just get them in there and say, look, we got caught up with the niggle, which is different to the stuff that was talked about, as we said, with Steve Hansen in the dressing sheds that was immediately over the ruck area. This is stuff well away from it and just the banter. So the referee picked up on it early. They were just sledging each other more than usual.
Yeah.
You could hear
did Checker mention the ref after the game?
Oh, no, I didn't listen to it. So he probably didn't, considering the result went his way. So victory to the Wallabies. It broke the drought, and it broke the drought in Brisbane too because it was a bit wet. But one of the disappointing things for me, Ben, was that it was the Bledisloe Cups were great scenes. There wasn't too much of a build-up to it, and it wasn't a full house, which is unfortunate. But everyone's going, how great was this game? But everyone missed out on seeing it because up until that point, there'd been such a devastating sort of response to the way the game has been governed in Australia.
Yeah. Look, a crowd of 45,000, I think the way the Wallabies had been going, and they've had very poor crowds this year at other games, the way they had been going in the rain, I didn't think was too bad. Yes, it was a shame it wasn't packed. The atmosphere was good, better than Sydney crowd. The atmosphere was really, really good. Mate. They get revved up. But I think the good news was the best TV ratings for a Wallabies game since 2011. And it's interesting, speaking to a couple of my friends who consider themselves, Wallabies fans on and off, who'd got sick of watching and seeing them lose, actually tuned in and saw a win. The Wallabies and Australian rugby will take a lot out of this.
There's another good reason for that. There's nothing else on. So it's the end of Rugby League season. The Rugby League World Cup didn't start, so it's actually in a good spot in terms of ratings. So as a TV guy, you're well placed. In fact, I would have been disappointed if it didn't rate because it was on its own, basically. There's some A-League, but, the rugby should rate, and it did, and it rated really well, which is great to see.
couple more points I just want to make out of the game, particularly in regards to the Wallabies. And you know, we have to say well done to Michael Checker and particularly to Nathan Gray as well about the way that team did. Only 11 missed tackles is enormous against the All Blacks. Only 11 missed tackles. And to keep them to 2 tries and 18 points. Keep them under 20 points and you're a big chance, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, and there were times where the All Blacks were smothered. They just couldn't find a way out.
Yeah.
You know, there was always a gold jersey there. It was actually surprising to see just how well they did in defence.
2 more guys to mention on that. I want to particularly talk about Luke Antui. I didn't mention at the start. Off the bench, came on when Simmons was injured, and it was right in front of me that, and I saw him moving, and apparently Simmons is fine, which is great. But Tui was great, and I'd said before I wanted to see him on the park to get some physicality in there, so he got more game time than he would have previously. He was fantastic. His footwork, his physicality, beating the first man. He and Dempsey were both beating those guys. McMahon was beating guys. Just enough to get you on that front foot, that advantage line play. And Tui, I think, has a big future. I said maybe at 6. Dempsey's got a bit of a run at that role right now, but Luke Antui, another one to watch. And finally, I want to take a little bit of air out of the kudos that Michael Hooper was getting for ignoring the 3 points. I think at the time, you know, it was pretty close. Might have still been 13-12 in favour of the All Blacks. And Hooper turned down 2 kicks, which were very kickable, right in front. And I think we got Korobiti's try out of it. But to be frank, he didn't actually make the calls. I watched it carefully on TV. The first one, Genia took a quick tap because he had his eyes up and was looking around, and he saw maybe Sam Cane was actually lying prone, so he thought he had an extra man. Genia took a quick tap. Hooper didn't even know. Hooper was looking back to his back line and had his hands on his hips, thinking about what they might do. Genia was off and gone, and they took. A minute later, same thing again, another penalty. This time Hooper was standing there. Folau is the one who had the ball and came over and said, go the line, and made sure that Foley heard him, and Folau made the call to go the line.
Yeah,
he wanted to get the
Hooper
pressure.
had to make the decision.
He did. I'm just saying it wasn't like inspired, pre-thinking captaincy, but yes, he did say go for it. The first one he didn't, but it was good to see.
So, there you go, Folau again.
Yeah. I think he was my man of the match. And that's usually... We see, I think that people err too much towards the backs in Wallabies game. All this year we've seen when Kurtley Beale got man of the match and others, we've seen forwards overlooked. Here I thought the forwards had massive games, but Folau was a monstrous game.
Yeah, no, I thought he was outstanding. But there was something they may have sensed at the time, but you know, 99 times out of 10, you take the points. You just throw it over.
I think I was screaming, take the points.
In a wet game like that.
I think I was screaming, take the points.
So I think, didn't Checker say afterwards that that he was fine with it, but I imagine at the time he might have been saying something under his breath if they cut away to the coach's box.
Well, he was actually on the mic for the second one.
Oh, was he?
At the time.
Oh.
And he said,
I was watching the other channel.
They can do whatever they like. So, you know, he did say that he was happy with whatever they do, and they did it.
Yeah. Did they show? Did he have his other finger around?
I don't know. I'll tell you what they did do in the first half when a decision went against him and they had him on the big screen at the ground, and you know how he goes up in the box.
Yeah.
The whole ground was cracking up because he was just losing it.
Oh, I know. Don't encourage him. Jeez.
Should we close out with the squads, mate? Just a quick talk.
We need to wind up here, mate.
All right, mate. No Israel Folau for the Wallabies. We've talked about that. That's going to create some interesting things. I want to see Tui get time over there.
Just quickly on that, what do you think about that? He's taking the
I don't agree with it.
Year off.
I don't agree with it. I've seen I think the All Blacks have done it right before when we've seen guys like McCaw and Reid come back late in Super Rugby. Wallabies is the pinnacle. It is what, you know, he should be playing for the Wallabies, and if we lose any Israel Folau time, it should come from the Super Rugby season.
100%.
He should come back a month late.
Yeah.
Yep, I think it's the wrong call, and I don't agree with it. But it does some interesting things. A couple of young backs I want to see get on a start. I want to see Paresi get a go on this tour. I think he's got something special. And if you're looking for a fullback, that Tom Banks out of the Brumbies, I think, you know, maybe he could squeak in as a bit of a trial guy if there's a chance to get some young talent in 15.
Yeah. So just on that, the Australians shouldn't be looking at this as an experimental tour. They should be trying to refine what they did in the last Test match and what they built on in the last few matches. They missed a golden opportunity in the June series. It was a debacle, but now they've got a really good phase of continuity together. Keep building on it, Ben. You know, they're missing Folau, but that's a shame. But keep everyone else the same.
But if you're taking a squad, do what the All Blacks do. Like, and they declare it every year. They say we're going to take a few blokes along and make sure they get introduced to the environment.
That's the All Blacks. The Wallabies what the Wallabies need to do is keep improving.
But I'm saying they don't necessarily play the guys, but they bring them into the environment, and maybe they'll get a bench spot in a lower game.
Correct, but I just don't want to see all these guys just thrown in for the sake of test matches. You know, we've got to make sure, or Australia's got to make sure that, yep, that was a good effort against the All Blacks, but then they have to keep going and look at England.
Well, the good thing is there's some young blokes in there, the likes of Hodge and Tui and that who are already playing well. Dempsey's young. The ABs, is Julian Sevilla finished for good? I mean, no spot for him in there. Matt Duffy gets a start. The NRL, bloke who come across from the NRL. Tamana Valu was in. We mentioned Asafo Amua in. And I think Hansen called him special. So with Cody Taylor there and Asafo Amua and a couple other blokes running around, plenty of depth in hooker and pressure on Coles. And some, Tim Perry, Jack Goodhue, no Brodie Retallick, which is, quite a sad state of affairs that he's not there for them. And they've got the Barbarians, France, Scotland, Wales. So looking forward to those tours. And I think, there'll be some things that'll be interesting to see what Hansen does, particularly after that last game.
All right. That's it, Ben?
That's it. Shout out to Dan Hickey, Lana Steele, Michael Holloway, House Davidson, Casey Mateen, Jimmy Hunt, Inama Matamu, Andy Mack, Jay Kelly, Andrew Langsford, all the usual guys. Sorry we're not into the comments today, but a short and sharp show, and I will see you online.
See you online. I might see someone in New Zealand. I'm off to, as this goes up, I'll be in the air to Wellington and then back Friday. And then we won't have a show next week, mate, because I'll be in Paris.
Well, there you go.
So I don't know, I might go try and see some rugby over there. See how Semi Radradra is going.
Mate, he's going very well.
Yeah, he's going all right. He scored a meat pie over there. It was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
All right, Ben, good to see you, mate. See you later.
Thanks, mate. And everyone, don't forget, comments, posts, likes. I'll have a chat to you online.
All right, and we'll map out a plan for the weeks coming ahead and the overseas tours.
We'll be back live. We will be back live.
All right, and I was actually really pumped about the quality of the YouTube feed.
It was great.
It was really, really good, and the comments there were just flowing. So they disappear afterwards, so you've got to make sure you enjoy that live experience.
That's right.
But the show will be up later on. The reason it gets put up later on is that everything's tweaked, like the audio and everything else goes up and it's proper. So if you want to wait for that final package, please do. All right, or on audio through iTunes. All right, mate, I'll see you later.
Thanks, mate.
I'll see you after NZ and Paris.
Absolutely.
All right, there he is, Ben Kimber. That is it from me, Jero Sen. Hope you enjoyed the last Bledisloe for the year. Enjoy your weekend this weekend, and I'll see you next time on RuggaMatrix International.